The shuttle landed on Vareth Prime with a soft hum. Megan Cole looked through the window at a world she had only seen in training videos. The sky was purple here. The buildings rose like silver needles into the clouds. Everything looked wrong and beautiful at the same time. She was 22 years old. She had graduated first in her class at West Point back on Earth. She had studied warfare since she was 14 years old. None of that mattered here. On this planet, she was just a human. A small, weak, soft-skinned human trying to join an academy built for warriors. The Galactic Military Academy had trained soldiers from 18 different species for over 3,000 years. It had never trained a human. When Earth joined the coalition, their leaders pushed hard for military access. They wanted humanity to have a seat at the table. They wanted respect. Megan was their test. She stepped off the shuttle and felt the eyes on her immediately. A group of Karathi stood near the landing pad. They were massive creatures, nearly 8 feet tall, with natural bone armor covering their bodies. Their ancestors had been apex predators on a death world. Evolution had made them into living weapons. One of them laughed. The sound was deep and rumbling, like stones grinding together. A Selvani officer approached her. The Selvani were reptilian, covered in scales that shifted color with their moods. This one's scales were a dull gray. Boredom, Megan remembered from her studies. Or possibly contempt. "Cadet Cole," the officer said. Her translator implant converted the hissing speech into flat English. "You are expected at processing. Follow the marked path. Do not wander." Megan nodded and walked. She kept her eyes forward, but her attention spread wide. She noticed how the different species grouped themselves. The Karathi stood in tight formations, shoulder to shoulder. The Selvani moved alone, keeping distance from others. The Villani, the tall blue-skinned species that ran the academy, watched everything from elevated positions. She noticed which species looked at her with curiosity and which looked at her with hostility. She noticed who talked and who stayed silent. She filed all of it away in her mind, like a general mapping enemy territory. Processing took 4 hours. Medical scans, psychological evaluations, equipment fitting. The supply officer struggled to find armor small enough for her frame. Eventually, he gave up and ordered a custom set from Earth specifications. "You will need it," he said. "The training here is not gentle." Her dormitory assignment was Wing 7. She learned quickly that this was where they placed the lesser species, the ones not expected to excel. Her roommate was a Pelian named Triss. Pelians looked like birds crossed with humans. They had feathers instead of hair, hollow bones for lighter weight, and large eyes adapted for aerial reconnaissance. They were not considered fighters. Their role in coalition forces was scouting and communication. Triss watched Megan unpack her bag with open curiosity. The Pelian's feathers shifted through several colors before settling on pale blue. "You are smaller than the video showed," Triss said. "Human videos?" "Coalition propaganda. They made your soldiers look larger, more threatening." Triss tilted her head in the way her species did when confused. "Why would they lie about this?" Megan smiled. "So enemies would underestimate us when they actually met us. That seems backward. Only if you think fighting is the only way to win." That night, Megan could not sleep. She lay in her bunk and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of an alien world. Wind hummed against the windows in a tone slightly off from Earth's winds. Insects or their equivalents made chirping sounds she did not recognize. Somewhere in the building, a Karathi snored loud enough to vibrate the walls. She thought about what waited for her tomorrow. Physical assessments. Combat evaluations. Tests designed by and for species that could tear her apart with their bare hands. She could not beat them at their game. She had known this before she left Earth. Her commanders had known it too. They had sent her anyway because they believed she could win at a different game entirely. Megan pulled out the book she had brought from home. It was old, printed on real paper. The pages had yellowed over 4 generations of her family. The cover was worn soft from countless hands. The Art of War by Sun Tzu, written over 2,000 years ago by a man who understood that strength was only one path to victory. The opening ceremony took place the next morning. High General Theron stood on a raised platform addressing the assembled cadets. He was Villani, tall and blue-skinned, with silver patterns on his face that marked him as a veteran of 100 campaigns. "You come from many worlds," he said. "You carry the traditions of your ancestors, the honor of your peoples, the hope of your futures. Here you will learn to fight together. Here you will learn to win together. Here you will become warriors." Megan stood among the cadets and studied them. She counted roughly 300 beings from 18 species. She was the only human. She was also the smallest person present. A Karathi cadet standing near her leaned down. His breath smelled like copper and meat. "Little creature," he rumbled. "You should go home. This place will break you." Megan looked up at him. She met his eyes without flinching. "Thank you for the advice," she said. "I will consider it." She had no intention of considering it. She had come here to prove something. Not to the aliens. Not to the Coalition. Not even to Earth. She had come to prove it to herself. That night, Triss found her reading again. The Pelion had grown curious about the strange human who showed no fear despite having every reason to feel it. "What is that book?" Triss asked. "Wisdom from an old warrior. He lived on Earth before my people had electricity or machines. He commanded armies using only his mind. What does it say?" Megan turned to a page she had memorized long ago. "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. The greatest victory is that which requires no battle." Triss's feathers shifted to yellow. Interest. "How can you win without fighting?" "By understanding your enemy better than they understand themselves. By attacking what they do not know to defend. By making their strength into their weakness." That sounds like trickery. It sounds like survival. Megan closed the book. "My species has no claws, no armor, no venom, no strength. We survived by thinking. We became the dominant species on our planet by being clever. I am here to show that cleverness has value in this galaxy too." Triss considered this for a long moment. Then she settled onto her perch and closed her eyes. "I hope you are right, human. For your sake." Megan turned off the light and lay in the darkness. Tomorrow the physical assessments would begin. Tomorrow she would fail every test they gave her, and then she would start winning in ways they never expected. The first month at the academy was designed to destroy the weak. Instructors pushed cadets until they broke. Those who could not meet standards were sent home in shame. The process had worked for 3,000 years. Megan finished last in every physical test. Strength assessment placed her at the bottom of all 300 cadets. The testing machine measured her maximum lift at levels the Karathi considered a joke. One of them, a brute named Brath, lifted her testing weight with one finger while his friends laughed. Speed trials saw her outpaced by everyone except the Gelthari. The Gelthari were crystalline beings who moved like slow rivers. They existed partly outside normal time. Racing against them was like racing against mountains. Endurance runs left her collapsed on the ground, while Karathi cadets completed extra laps for fun. The medical officer checked her vital signs and shook his head. "You are not built for this," he said. "Your species lacks the basic requirements for coalition military service." Megan wiped sweat from her face and stood up. Her legs shook. Her lungs burned. Everything hurt. "The tests continue," she said. "I continue with them." The other cadets stopped hiding their contempt. Brath made a game of blocking her path in corridors. He would stand like a wall and force her to walk around him. His friends would watch and make comments in Karathi that the translator chose not to convert. The Salvani cadets hissed jokes whenever she passed. Their scales flashed colors she learned to recognize as mockery. They called her praything and soft meat and other names that lost meaning in translation. Megan wrote everything down. Every insult, every confrontation, every pattern of behavior. She mapped the social structure of the academy the way her ancestors had mapped enemy camps. She identified who held power, who wanted power, who would follow and who would fight. The second month brought tactical simulations. Finally, something she could use. Cadets were divided into squads and placed in holographic battle scenarios. The simulations felt real. The weapons fired energy that stung on impact. The enemy forces, controlled by computers, adapted to strategies and punished mistakes. Megan's squad was assembled from the bottom ranks. Herself, Triss, a Gelthry who had chosen the name Crystal because humans could not pronounce her real name, and two Karathi named Vex and Moore who complained loudly about the assignment. Their first scenario was simple. Defend the position against waves of enemy attackers. The standard approach was obvious. Put the strongest fighters at the front. Support them from behind. Hold the line. Megan suggested something different. The enemy AI learns, she explained to her squad. It watches our formation and adapts its attacks. If we put Karathi at the front, it will target them with heavy weapons. If we stay static, it will find our weaknesses. Vex growled. He stood nearly 3 feet taller than her. His bone armor made him look like a living tank. You want us to follow your orders? A human? I could kill you with a thought. Can you kill the enemy AI with a thought? Because that is what we are here to defeat. I could crush you in one hand, and I could make you win this scenario in half the time of any other squad. Which matters more to you? Your pride or your victory? The words hung in the air. Karathi culture placed victory above everything. To choose pride over winning was a deep shame. Megan had studied their ways carefully. She knew exactly which buttons to press. Vex stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Tell us your plan, human. The plan was unusual. Crystal took the front position first. Her crystalline body reflected energy weapons, confusing the enemy targeting systems. When they adapted to her, Triss took to the air, calling out enemy movements from above while Vex and Moore flanked through paths Megan had identified as sensor blind spots. Megan herself stayed in the center, watching everything, adjusting the plan in real time as conditions changed. They scored highest in their training group. Not by a little, by a lot. Instructor Velen, a scarred Salvani veteran, pulled Megan aside after the exercise. Your approach was unusual, she said. Her scales showed no color, which meant she was controlling her reactions carefully. Was it wrong? It was effective. Dangerously effective. The instructor studied her with cold eyes. You think differently than the warriors I have trained. This may be valuable. Or it may be a threat. I have not decided which. Over the following weeks, Megan's squad climbed the rankings. They went from last place to 10th, then to 5th, then to 3rd. Other cadets started watching her. They noticed how she studied opponents before simulations. They saw how she adjusted tactics mid-battle. They began to wonder if maybe the small human knew something they did not. Brath did not stop his harassment, but he became more careful about it. He watched her too now. His eyes followed her in ways that felt less like contempt and more like calculation. Triss asked her about it one night. The Karathi is afraid of you now. Why? You cannot hurt him. He is not afraid of what I can do to his body. He is afraid of what I can do to his mind. Megan set down her book. He has spent his whole life being the strongest. He never had to be the smartest. Now he sees someone winning without strength, and he does not know how to fight that. What will he do? He will try to force me into a fight where strength matters. He will try to make me play his game instead of mine. And what will you do? Megan smiled. I will let him think he succeeded. And then I will show him that even his game can be won with thought instead of muscle. The rankings updated at the end of each week. Megan watched her squad's number climb higher and higher. She watched the other cadets' attitudes shift from mockery to uncertainty to something that almost looked like respect. She was still the weakest person at the academy. She could not lift what they lifted. She could not run as fast or fight as hard or survive as much damage, but she was starting to win. And winning, she knew, was the only language that warriors truly understood. Word of Megan's victory spread through the academy like fire. Within a day, everyone knew what had happened. The small human had defeated a karate warrior in single combat, not through strength or skill with a blade, but through something else entirely. Some cadets came to her with new respect. They asked questions about tactics and strategy. They wanted to understand how she thought. Others came with new hostility. Her success threatened everything they believed about warfare. If a weak human could defeat a mighty karate, what did that say about their own advantages? High General Theron summoned her to his office. They talked for 3 hours. He asked about human military history. He wanted to know how her species had conquered a planet while being physically inferior to many of its predators. Megan told him about ancient battles, about generals who won through deception and positioning rather than brute force. She told him about wars won without fighting and victories achieved through understanding rather than destruction. The High General listened carefully. His silver facial markings shifted as he processed what she said. Your species thinks differently, he observed. You see war as a puzzle to solve rather than a contest of strength. We had no choice. We could not outfight our predators. We had to outthink them. And now you apply this thinking to the coalition, if you will let me. The final examination of the academy year was approaching. The coalition war game was the largest test any cadet would face. All 300 cadets would be divided into 2 armies. They would fight across a simulated continent for 3 days, trying to capture strategic objectives and defeat the enemy force. Command positions were assigned based on ranking. Megan's squad sat at 2nd place overall. She expected a mid-level position, perhaps leading a company of 50 cadets. Instead, she was named Supreme Commander of the Blue Force. The announcement caused an uproar. Several instructors protested. A human commanding coalition forces, even in a simulation. It went against every tradition. It insulted the warrior species who had led armies for thousands of years. But High General Theron supported the decision. He wanted to see what she would do. The Red Force was commanded by Sithis, a Salvani who had ranked 1st since the beginning of the year. Sithis was brilliant in conventional warfare. He had won every simulation through superior tactics and aggressive action. Megan spent the first day before the war game meeting with her officers. She did not give speeches about unity or shared purpose. She asked questions. What did each species do best? What did they struggle with? What tactics did they consider acceptable and which did they view as dishonorable? The answers shaped her strategy. The war game began on a simulated continent 500 miles across. Both forces started at opposite ends. Strategic objectives were scattered between them. The army that controlled the most objectives after 3 days would win. Sithis organized his Red Force in the traditional way. Heavy combat units at the front. Mobile units on the flanks. Command elements protected in the rear. It was the approach that had won coalition battles for centuries. Megan did something completely different. She divided her force into small independent cells. Each cell contained a mix of species, chosen to balance different strengths. Each cell had authority to make its own decisions without waiting for orders from above. Instead of a rigid command structure, she created a network. Information flowed freely between cells. Local commanders adapted to conditions as they found them. The Karathi and her force resisted at first. Their tradition demanded clear chains of command and direct confrontation. Megan explained her reasoning. Civis expects us to fight like a coalition army. Every victory he has ever won came against enemies who acted predictably. We will not be predictable. We will be everywhere and nowhere. We will make him fight our war, not his. The first battle took place at Dawn Ridge, a high point that overlooked 3 objectives. Civis sent his heavy units to seize it. Control of Dawn Ridge meant control of the surrounding area. Megan's forces offered light resistance, then withdrew. Civis claimed victory. His troops celebrated. They held the high ground. Meanwhile, Megan's cells had bypassed Dawn Ridge entirely. They captured 2 secondary objectives that Civis had left poorly defended. When his heavy units moved to respond, her forces at Dawn Ridge emerged from hiding to cut his supply lines. Suddenly, his victory at Dawn Ridge meant nothing. His troops held a position but could not be resupplied or reinforced. The pattern repeated across the continent. Civis won every direct engagement. His forces were superior in straight combat. But Megan never gave him straight combat. She attacked his logistics, destroying supplies before they reached his troops. She spread false information through channels she knew his scouts monitored. She let her cells take initiative, rewarding creative solutions even when they failed. By the second day, Civis's command structure was cracking. His officers were trained to follow orders, not make decisions. They could not adapt fast enough to threats that appeared without warning and vanished before they could respond. His species-based unit organization created communication problems. Karathi units struggled to coordinate with Selvani units. Everyone followed their own traditions instead of working together. Megan's mixed cells had no such problems. They had trained together. They understood each other. They operated as a unified force despite their differences. On the 3rd day, Civis launched a desperate attack. He gathered his remaining forces for one massive assault on Megan's central position. If he could capture her command center, he might still win. Megan let him come. She pulled her defenders back, leaving only token resistance. Civis pushed forward, certain that victory was within reach. He did not realize he was walking into a trap. Megan's cells had been moving behind his advance. When Civis committed fully to the assault, they closed the circle. His army found itself surrounded, cut off from supply, unable to retreat. The simulation ended with Civis's forces captured or destroyed. Blue Force controlled 70% of strategic objectives. They had lost more individual engagements than they won, but they had won the war. High General Theron observed the final moments from the command center. The human fights like water, he said to Instructor Velen. She flows around obstacles instead of through them. Velen nodded slowly. Perhaps that is why humans conquered their world. They learned to make the battlefield itself their weapon. Megan stood in her command center and watched the victory tallies update. Around her, officers from a dozen species celebrated. They had doubted her at the beginning. Now they cheered her name. She did not celebrate. She was already thinking about what came next. The war game was practice. The real war was still coming, and she intended to be ready. The Karathi Spring Festival marked the middle point of the academy year. For 3 days, cadets celebrated with feasts and ceremonies and displays of martial skill. The most important event was the Circle of Blades. The circle was ancient. Tradition said it began 10,000 years ago when the first Karathi warriors needed to settle disputes without destroying their clans. 2 fighters entered the circle with traditional weapons. One left victorious. The other left with whatever honor remained after defeat. Champions from each species participated. They fought in single combat using the weapons of their ancestors. The Karathi used heavy curved swords. The Selvani used paired claws that attached to their natural talons. The Villani used long spears that sang when they cut the air. Humans had no champion at the academy. Megan had no intention of entering. She knew her limits. A sword fight against a Karathi would last approximately 2 seconds, both of which would be painful. The tradition did not care about her intentions. On the morning of the second festival day, Brath invoked the right of challenge. Under Academy rules, any cadet could challenge another to the circle if they believed that cadet had dishonored them. The challenged party could not refuse without losing their position at the Academy. Brath stood before the assembled cadets and pointed at Megan. "This human has dishonored true warriors," he declared. "She wins through tricks and deception. She makes mockery of honest combat. I challenge her to prove her worth in the circle of blades." The crowd went silent. Everyone looked at Megan. She understood what was happening. Brath had watched her rise through the rankings. He had seen other cadets start to respect her. He could not allow a human to succeed where Karathi struggled. His pride demanded action. This was exactly what she had predicted. He was forcing her onto his ground, into his kind of fight. She had 3 days to prepare for combat against someone who could break her in half without trying. The first day, she went to the library. She pulled every record of Karathi duels in Academy history. She watched hundreds of fights, studying how Karathi warriors moved and attacked. She noted their patterns. Karathi fighters favored offense. They attacked constantly, using their strength and armor to overwhelm opponents. Defense was almost an insult to them. A true warrior should be attacking, not hiding behind a guard. They also tired quickly. Their species had evolved for short bursts of extreme violence, not extended combat. Their bone armor, which protected them so well, also weighed them down over time. She noted these things carefully. The second day, she practiced movement, not sword techniques. She had no time to learn those. Instead, she ran obstacle courses designed for smaller species. She worked on her footwork, her balance, her ability to change direction in an instant. She studied the dueling arena as well. She walked its floor and memorized every slight unevenness, every scratch in the surface. She noted how the light fell and which angles created shadows that might obscure vision. The third day, she rested. Is found her meditating in their quarters that morning. "You cannot win," the Pelion said. There was no cruelty in her voice, just honest assessment. That depends on what winning means. Defeating your opponent. Staying alive. These seem important. Megan opened her eyes. Brath expects me to fight like a warrior. He has practiced for years against warriors. He knows every attack they might make and every defense they might try. He is ready for a warrior. And you will not be a warrior? I will be something he has never fought before. The arena filled with spectators. High General Theron himself attended. Ambassadors from several species came to watch. The betting ran heavily against Megan. Some bookmakers refused to take wagers on her survival. Brath entered first. He wore ceremonial armor polished to a mirror shine. He carried the traditional Karathi warblade, a curved weapon nearly as long as Megan was tall. He raised it to the crowd and roared. The spectators roared. Back. Megan entered carrying a weapon she had requested from the armory. It was a human rapier. Thin, light, almost delicate compared to the massive Karathi blade. Several spectators laughed at the sight. The ritual began. Brath bellowed the traditional war cry of his people. The sound shook the walls. Megan stood silent. The signal to begin flashed across the arena. Brath charged. He was fast for his size, crossing the space between them in 3 great strides. His blade swept in an arc that would have cut a normal opponent in 2. Megan was not there. She had moved the moment she saw his weight shift forward. She slid to his left, into the blind spot created by his armor's shoulder plate. He turned, swinging again. She ducked beneath the blow. Her small size, her weakness, became an advantage. She was too low for his blade to find Dot. She did not try to block. She could not. His strength would shatter her weapon and probably her arms. Instead, she let his own power carry him past her. For 5 minutes, Wrath attacked with growing fury. He swung and stabbed and swept his blade through the air again and again. Megan danced around him like water flowing past a rock. She never stood still. She never let him predict where she would be. The crowd grew quiet. They began to see what was happening. Wrath was tiring. His movements slowed. His breathing grew heavier. The bone armor that protected him was draining his strength with every second. Megan began to strike. Small cuts to the joints where his armor did not cover. Nothing serious. Nothing that would end the fight. But each cut reminded him she could reach him when he could not reach her. After 8 minutes, Wrath fell to his knees. His arms shook with exhaustion. His blade slipped from his fingers and clattered to the ground. Megan stood over him. Her rapier steady, her breathing controlled. In Karathi tradition, a warrior surrendered by lowering their weapon to the ground. Wrath's weapon was already there. The silence in the arena stretched for a long moment. Then someone began to clap. Then another. Then the sound grew until it filled the space like thunder. Megan had won. Not by being stronger. Not by being a better fighter. She had won by being smarter. She had won by understanding her enemy and making his strengths work against him. She extended her hand to Wrath. After a moment, he took it. She helped him to his feet. "You fight without honor," he said quietly. "I fight to win," she replied. "In a real war, honor does not stop bullets." Something shifted in his eyes. Not respect exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Megan walked out of the arena knowing that everything had changed. She was no longer the joke of the academy. She was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before, and she was only getting started. Graduation day on Vareth Prime brought visitors from across the galaxy. Ambassadors arrived in elegant ships. Military commanders came in warships bristling with weapons. Political leaders came surrounded by guards and advisors. They had all heard the stories. A human cadet had defeated a Karathi warrior in single combat. A human commander had won the coalition war game against the best tactical mind of a generation. The small, weak, soft species from the young world called Earth had proven something that made many powerful beings uncomfortable. Megan Cole stood among her fellow graduates in the great hall. Her human dress uniform looked plain beside the elaborate ceremonial armor worn by other species. She was still the smallest person in any room she entered, but she was no longer the weakest. "Hi." General Theron addressed the assembled cadets one final time. He spoke of duty and honor and the challenges that awaited them. He spoke of enemies gathering at the borders of coalition space. He spoke of wars that might come and sacrifices that might be required. Then, he began announcing assignments. Each graduate received their commission and posting. The best performers went to elite combat units. Others went to support roles or training commands. The assignments followed tradition and expectation until he reached Megan's name. "Lieutenant Megan Cole," Theron announced. "Assigned to the Tactical Development Division, Special Projects." A murmur ran through the crowd. The Tactical Development Division handled experimental approaches to warfare. Special Projects was its most secretive branch. They developed new doctrines, new strategies, new ways of thinking about combat. It was not a combat assignment. It was something potentially far more important. After the ceremony, Theron approached her privately. "You understand why you received this assignment," he said. "It was not a question. You want to study how I think." "Partly." The High General's silver markings shifted in a pattern she had learned meant serious consideration. "The Coalition faces threats that strength alone cannot defeat. The hierarchy grows more powerful each year. They have numbers we cannot match, technology we cannot overcome, and a willingness to sacrifice that exceeds even our most dedicated warriors." Megan nodded. The hierarchy was the Coalition's great enemy, a collective of species that had merged their minds into a single purpose. They did not negotiate. They did not compromise. They simply consumed world after world, system after system. Traditional tactics have failed to stop them, Theron continued. We win battles, but lose ground. We destroy their fleets, but they build more. We cannot outfight them because there will always be more of them than there are of us. You want me to find another way. I want you to teach others to find it. Theron looked at her with an expression she recognized as respect, something she had not expected to see from one of the galaxy's greatest warriors. Your greatest victory at this academy was not defeating Brath or winning the war game. It was showing cadets from 18 species that warfare is not about being the strongest fighter. It is about being the smartest one. Megan considered his words. She thought about the cadets she had trained with. Some of them would become great officers. Some would die in battles yet to come. All of them had learned something from watching her. Even if they did not realize it yet, she thought about Earth. Her homeworld was still rebuilding from the chaos of first contact, when humanity had discovered it was not alone in the universe. Her people were still finding their place among species that had traveled between stars, while humans were still learning to make fire. She thought about the future. Not just her future, but the future of everyone she might influence. The hierarchy believes they will win because they sacrifice more than we do, she said finally. They are wrong. Victory does not belong to those who sacrifice the most. It belongs to those who achieve the most while sacrificing the least. That is what I will teach. Theron nodded slowly. Then teach well, Lieutenant. The galaxy may depend on it. 3 days later, Megan boarded a transport heading for the Tactical Development Division headquarters. The station orbited a dying star at the edge of Coalition space. Few knew it existed. Fewer still knew what happened inside. Triss had requested transfer to the same division. The Pelion sat beside McGeehan as their ship prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed. The others think you won because you are clever, Triss said. They are wrong. Then why did I win? Because you understand. You understood Brad's weakness before he knew he had one. You understood the academy before you set foot on it. You understand the universe in a way that most warriors never will. Megan looked out the viewport at the stars. Each point of light was a sun with its own worlds and its own peoples. Some were coalition. Some were hierarchy. Some belonged to species that humanity had not yet encountered. Sun Tzu wrote that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting, she said. Every blade they brought to the arena, every warrior they sent against me, every tradition they claimed made them superior, all of it was useless against someone who refused to fight on their terms. And now? Now I have a galaxy to teach. The ship jumped. The stars stretched into lines and then vanished into the strange light of faster-than-light travel. Behind them lay the academy and all its ancient traditions. Behind them lay Brath and Sithis and hundreds of cadets who had learned that strength was not everything. Ahead lay the Tactical Development Division and wars yet to come. Ahead lay enemies who thought themselves invincible and allies who doubted humanity's worth. Megan Cole had proven herself at the academy. But the academy was just training. The real test was coming. She opened her book, the worn copy of The Art of War that had traveled with her across the stars. The pages were more battered now than when she had arrived, but the words remained unchanged. Know yourself and know your enemy. And in 100 battles, you will never be in danger. Humanity's greatest weapon had never been strength or speed or natural armor. It had been the ability to think, to learn, to adapt. It had been the mind that could look at any problem and find a solution. The galaxy was about to learn what that weapon could do. And Megan Cole would be the one to show them.